We start off as usual with a prayer for teacher and student. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavahai Tejasvinavaditam Astu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May that one protect us both. May that one nourish us both. May we work together with great energy. May our study be illumined. May we not unnecessarily cavil with each other. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. So this is a session which will be a little loose. In other words, there is room for dialogue and questions. The reason why I selected this subject, about Japa, that is the significance of Japa, is because tomorrow is the birth anniversary, tithi puja of Swami Brahmananda. And if you go to Bellumat, you will see that the only two disciples of Sri Ramakrishna, that is excluding Holy Mother herself, will be to Swami Vivekananda and Swami Brahmananda. Swami Brahmananda's birthday tomorrow. And what are his teachings, along with the teachings of all the other disciples of Ramakrishna? And that is the emphasis on Japa, the importance of Japa. What is Japa? Japa is a systematic repetition of a mantra, and so we have to explore what is a mantra. Now, there are various systems in religious practice or spiritual practice, and all of them are calculated to direct the mind in a concentrated way. Whether it is love of God, worship of God, or whether it is dedicating all your activities in a mindful way, or whether it is directing the mind through a certain discernment about the reality of existence itself, whether you are inclined toward intellectual pursuits, or whether you are a relational kind of person, most people are, or whether you are volitionary orientated and driven. All of these systems are called yogas, and yoga is derived from this root, yuj, which implies a union, a concentration of your own will to some expanded version of it. This expanded version of it we can call "Let Thy Will Be Done." That is a subordinate individual will to something greater. And the culmination of that will be a kind of mystic union, which itself is called yoga. The means to it is called yoga. But the one common factor for all of these systems is that they're all aimed at concentration, and they all involve mantra. All of them adopt the system of mantra. In fact, if we can see the Kathopanishad, Salve Veda Yat Padma Padam Ma Mananti Tapamsi Sarvanecha Yadvadanti. The goal which all the Vedas uniformly extol, says the Kathopanishad, which all acts of tapas or discipline or strengthening their will speak of, and wishing for which people lead the life of purity and self-control, that goal, I tell you briefly, says Yama, the teacher, it is this Om. And if you want Shankaracharya's commentary, he'll say that to that person who has questioned death, explain the thing asked for, and that is, what is the fundamental goal of life? And it turns out to be the worship of Om, what praiseworthy goal all the Vedas without a break extol. With one voice they all declare, this goal, all acts of self-discipline are intended to lead, and desirous of which people live in the residence of their teacher, that's the traditional way, or practice other kinds of self-discipline to attain the supreme principle, the absolute, that goal which you wish to learn. I'm telling you briefly, it is Om. The goal which to learn is the goal which is denoted by this word Om, and of which the word Om is a substitute, that is a pratika, that is a kind of symbol, an indicator. If you have a finger that points toward the moon, be sure that you are concentrated on the moon, not the finger. This is a pratika, a symbol. And so therefore the most primordial mantra in every single system, be it Vedic system or the tantric system, whatever system is employed, whatever yoga is employed, Om is a primordial mantra. And if you don't have any mantra systematically given to you by a teacher, or you have no mantra that appeals to you or don't understand, then this Om, repetition of this Om, is not only the way. Patanjali says repetition of the Om is the way, and meditating on its meaning. Now, there's a great mistake about mantras, that mantras are simply sounds and which have no meaning. And to demonstrate this, you're all familiar with my giving you this mantra and of ko, ka, and you repeat that ko, ka, and it ends up in cola, Coca-Cola. Now, this is actually a kind of experiment that was conducted some years ago to say that if you repeat any sound, meaningless sound, hum or anything that is monotonous, then it will calm the mind. And this is true. Anything repeated rhythmically will calm the mind, but it won't aid concentration. It is not a mantra. And so a mantra must have a meaning, because every word has a corresponding meaning. Every sound has a corresponding meaning. And most of the mantras will have a meaning and will also have a non-linguistic meaning. This is called a seed mantra or a bija mantra. That is, in the depths of meditation, some sound arises, and the sound is compatible with the actual subtle element that it represents. Let me explain a little bit further. Om is important because it is the representational sound of the first primordial movement, if you will. The Vedic cosmology will tell you that in the beginning, if you have a beginning, there is a manifested potentiality. That potentiality manifests again as a kind of vibration, a first tremor. And that creative tremor then bifurcates into 5 different ways, actually, according to our Sankhya philosophy, which are experts in this, and everybody agrees with it. And these 5 different ways are different waves, wave systems, and combinations of these will produce the world that we acknowledge. Now, if you study this properly, you will reconcile all the head-scratching moments in modern science. All the question marks which are there in modern science are answered by understanding this combination of waves. The combination is put out mathematically, proportionately, so that the first eruption of this will be what is called agasha, that is interpreted as a kind of potential energy or space. Space is the gravitational field in which gravity operates. And Einstein combined this space-time continuum. I don't want to make this a talk on science, but mantra, the science of mantra, is indeed a science also. Because what it means is that by repeating the sound symbol of these subtle elements, you access this divine grace which comes out as a wave system. And you can imagine it like a kind of progressive avenue, a progressive road toward the divine. Knowing that if you have a sudden revelation about the supreme principle, then you'll have a military coup against it tomorrow. And so every teacher knows that to guide a person from where they are standing, and everybody's standing in a different position, progressively, in a subtle way, toward the reality. Reality defined as something that is permanently there, doesn't waver, doesn't change, something that is the same today as it was 1,000 years ago and will be the same 1,000 years hence, and is outside even the scope of time and space. So this idea of a mantra is there. The derivation of this term mantra, of course, you can put it in two ways. Man, derived from the same thing as manana, thinking, and tra, which is the first syllable of trana, means liberation. So from all the various bondages of the phenomenal world that we experience, the use of a mantra is designed to unravel all of these fetters and take you closer to the divine in two ways. Firstly, by concentrating on the meaning of it. And secondly, if you're using a bija mantra, by accessing the meaning behind the word as a reality. And so there are these twofold mechanisms which are there. It's said to be something like calling forth. There's a phrase, amantrana. There are four aims of life, according to the Vedic traditions, and you can access fulfillment in all of these avenues. We don't delegitimize the aims which are concerned with so-called normal working, waking life. But these are well defined, and they act as a kind of architectural structure for life, which creates some kind of security and solidity for us. But what is the first aim of life? It is described as dharma. It's compatible with studentship, where we learn character building. We learn to be good citizens. Dharma derived, as I mentioned many times before, from the root, the thing that knits everything together in perfect harmony, the thing that binds everything nicely. When we observe the whole universe, including this microcosmic version of it called the human body, we'll see everything is working in a certain rhythm and harmony with a certain mathematical structure that modern science hardly questions, and they should question. Why are there various constants in the universe? Why is there a gravitational constant and a speed of light constant? There are something like 9 fundamental constants that are there, all unexplained. Progress in science is when we unify these constants. Now, all these constants are mentioned in these wave systems that come out as mantras. And so if you talk about energetic systems, we have potential energy, we have kinetic energy, we have radiational energy, and we have electrical energy, and we have magnetic energy. And when you combine the last two, you have electromagnetism. That's a great victory, because we've removed one of the constants. A wonderful, wonderful discovery that managed to combine, seeing the connectivity between electricity and magnetism into one principle. Supposing we are able to do the same thing with all these constants, what will we come back to? We'll come back to Om, this one creative principle from which everything else is derived. And so mantra is also defined as a protecting thought. Protecting against what? Protecting against doubt, fear, and temptation. These are constantly plaguing the human mind. So if you want to calm a disturbed mind, if you suffer from insomnia because you have a troubled mind, instead of counting sheep, try to count your blessings. So if you form a habit of continuously counting your blessings, bringing up a sense of appreciation, bringing up a sense of thankfulness, gratitude, elevating the mind in a positive way, this is mantra really, an internal speech which serves to elevate the mind. And by elevating the mind, we are manifesting it physically because every cell of the body thrills with it. We're elevating the unconscious area, the habit level, which is intrinsically probably in the red. That is, we owe it a proportion of input that will bring it back into a positive situation. And so by repeating these positive phrases, then we elevate the habit level. And that really gives us freedom. Because when the subconscious mind is saturated with a quality that has no egocentric component in it, things such as purity and love and goodness and harmony and all the higher noble values that we know of, then statistically you might say 51% of this is enough to give you so-called salvation. Of course, 80% is better. Now we also need the other components, egoistic components, otherwise life and living becomes impossible. And so there's no such thing as 100% of this purity. We need some other components to bring us into a realistic way of living. Dharma is the foundation for it. And then we have artha, wealth creation. There are some schools of thought which said we should eschew all forms of money. And when Ramakrishna says, we should eschew this lust and greed, which is symbolized as woman and gold for men, and for women it's man and gold, is symbol for lust and greed. It's not that we should not have any money or wealth. This is the very reason why in Hinduism, Lakshmi is worshipped, because wealth is a manifestation of the inherent abundance that nature offers us, and we should be thankful for it. So it's not that, it's just a revaluation. Instead of using it for selfish purposes, we use it for a higher good, for the benefit of all. So wealth creation is an important component in human life, tapping into nature's abundance. And then the third aim will be fulfilling legitimate desires. But the fourth aim has nothing to do with materialism. The fourth aim is the fundamental aim connected with the purpose of life, and namely moksha, liberation, freedom from what? Freedom from pain, produced by these three components of doubt and fear and temptation, or an assumption that there's a hollow in me that I have to fulfill from the outside called desire. So mantra is a protecting thought. Now, a mantra that is associated with a certain chosen ideal, that is following the popular path of bhakti yoga, that is a mantra that is the sound embodiment of this chosen ideal. That means that when you repeat it, you are connecting with this divine principle. Just like if I call your name, you'll turn around and pay attention to what I'm saying. If I call your name, you'll turn around and say, yes, did you call me? In this same way, when we call upon the divine presence continuously, constantly, we are tuning our attention into the glory of the divine self, or what we popularly call God. That is your chosen ideal. That is, we gave a talk the other night on Ishvara, tuning into that aspect, manifested aspect, that is omnipresent, omniscient, and omnipotent. So mantras were not invented, they were discovered. They were discovered by rishis or seers of these mantras, these sounds, and put into the nearest equivalent human representation of it. In a state of superconsciousness, these were revealed. And so therefore, by playing it backwards, by again repeating these mantras, then we come to the same process that the meditator originally had during the revelation. Now, what is japa? Japa is the systematic repetition of a chosen protecting thought, a chosen sound embodiment of your Ishta Devata, or if you're not following the path of Bhakti Yoga, the sound embodiment of the highest principle. And therefore, Om, for this reason, is the primordial mantra. Of course, there are mantras that are used for other purposes. There are mantras that are used for protection in difficult circumstances. For example, the repetition of Rang, which is the bija mantra for the principle of a radiation or fire. And so in a difficult circumstance, by repeating this mantra, you get out of the trouble. The bija mantra, the seed mantra, is really just the human vocal interpretation of it. But the actual mantra can be heard. There was once somebody who asked, have you heard Om? And the student, a nameless student for the time being, will say, well, of course I've heard Om. It's repeated in all the prayers. And what do you mean by this? No. Have you actually heard it? In the depths of meditation, you can hear it. And this human sound representation of Om, actually, not only does it have a meaning to it, that is a rational meaning to it, but it also connects you. It's a vibration which is not exactly the sound Om. You'll recognize it when you hear it. And so there is empirical evidence of the actual vibration of this Om. This vibration, having a frequency, having a wavelength, is as much a physical thing as anything else, but it's extremely subtle, because this whole physical world really is only one thing, just in manifested form. When you had time, when you had space, when you had certain conditions, certain combinations, then you will hear these various sounds. So for completeness sake, we have to say that there are really two broad types of mantras. And one we can say would be Vedic mantras. All the schools of thought will recognize these mantras, and they can be fulfillers of these four aims of life. So the mantra of any of these particular forms, subtle forms of nature, these wave systems, which we can call devatas or divine beings. There are many, many mantras for these. But the mantra of any one of them is that letter or combination of letters which reveals that aspect of the divine, which we call deva or devata. So a mantra is that which protects us. And for this reason, we should pay particular attention to their repetition. Now, there is a defined system of repetition of these, which enhances our concentration. This is according to the Mahanirvana Tantra, the tantric text, one of the 64 tantras. And we find a wonderful example of how a mantra should be repeated and how japa should be done. The extract on mantra goes like this. To thee I bow, who art one with and the support of the universe. It begins like that. This is how we begin repetition of mantra as japa. It says, I bow to thee again and again, the Adya Kalika, both creatrix and destructress, creation and destruction. We often look at the creation side of things, for example, the creator, or we look at the protector, giving us a protective field, or we look at the dissolver. Dissolver of what? Well, a dissolver of our ignorance. And having thus made obeisance, says this text, to the Devi in this case, because all the Tantric Riksha are orientated toward the feminine aspect, a person should leave their house, placing the left foot first, and do whatever they need to do in terms of their physical requirements, cleanse their teeth, for example, and so on. Then you should go towards some water and make some ablutions in a prescribed manner. Prescribed manner means repetition of a mantra. What is that mantra? Atma Tattvaya Swaha. And then after sipping some water, Vijaya Tattvaya Swaha, Shiva Tattvaya Swaha, respectively. And then he should rinse the upper lip twice, and so on and so forth. All of these you recognize as prerequisites for puja. And puja, the whole of puja is accompanied by mantras. Now there are two ways of repeating mantras, completely mindlessly. And we think, for example, of the Christian mantras. Christian mantras, we can say, in terms of the Catholic rosary, which can be said so hastily to be completely meaningless, imbued with complete superstition, that by repeating this we'll get some kind of benefit. The same thing I've observed in all the pujas and havans, that a priest will maybe repeat the mantras so hastily and that they become really meaningless, and therefore all their potency is removed. And so drawing water, that means every single activity we do can be accompanied by a mantra, is the overall meaning of this. And so the wise disciple should draw on the water, the kula yantra, with the mantra in its center, and do japa over it with the mula mantra 12 times, and so on and so forth, all of these. Meditating on the water as the image of fire. In other words, when we employ water for washing, we can see what is the value of it, because the water that we are using is the concrete materialization of the subtle element, which is also confusingly called water, api. It simply means a combination of various vibratory frequencies and wavelengths that come to us in a subtle form. We can access it through our bija mantra and register it as divine waves coming to us. And in this way, we create a connectedness. We create a connectedness with the divine. So every activity that uses water, that uses heat, that uses any of these various elements can be traced back to the divine origin with the help and use of a mantra. Then, of course, Gayatri mantra is also there, a significant mantra that is seen to be all mantras come back to this, and then that dissolves into the primordial mantra, Om. And so the significance of the Gayatri mantra is there from the beginning, such that 8 or 9-year-olds are initiated into this mantra when they are given the symbolic thread. Thread meaning it is a symbol of a new piece of clothing put on, a new orientation of the mind. All of these are part and parcels of useful ritualistic things. Rituals are the superficial form of meditation. They are the kindergarten forms of meditation, which lead us to higher forms, more subtle forms. Of course, when during water we understand this Bija mantra connecting the various rivers. In India, of course, it will be Ganga, Yamuna, Godavari, Saraswati, Narmada, Sindhu, Kaveri. Come into this water, you're invoking all of these. During bathing, you can do this. And the intelligent worshipper, says this tantra, having invoked the sacred rivers with this mantra and made the Ankusha Mudra, should do japa with the Mula mantra 12 times. Let him then again utter the Mula mantra with the middle and nameless fingers joined together, throw drops of water that thrice upon the ground, and so on. Now, what is the mudra? Mantra can be accompanied by mudras. These mudras require an understanding of what the various digits of the hand represent. So, for example, the thumb will represent that subtle element of fire. It's not actually fire, by the way. It's just that it's described in this way, where the energy called radiation dominates. And fire. And then you see, if you go clockwise around the finger, the little finger will then be represent water. Water is a tanmatra, which simply bifurcates into the all tastes or mouths that will get it. It's connected with electrical energy naturally, and all mouths that taste it, and all things that flow, all liquid things. And then going on from there, going clockwise, the next finger will, the tip of the finger, that will represent, what do you think? It will represent, of course, it will represent earth, solidity, in other words. And then the next finger will be Akasha, space, and the next one will be Vayu, or air. And when you join the air and the fire, well, naturally, you sustain the fire through air. Now, all of these are not literal. None of these are literal. It is not literally fire. It is only that the fire that we experience has a dominance of this particular subtle element called tanmatra, mere subtle elements. Now, it's important to understand these subtle elements, because these subtle elements brings the mind in a meditative way progressively back to a cosmic mind whose sound symbol is Om. And this cosmic creative mind will create all of these subtle graces. So this mantra and repetition, systematic repetition of it, is useful in helping us to concentrate our mind. And when we concentrate it, we're step by step going toward a state of liberation, but we are also protecting ourselves against all the negativity that is contained in our mind. So every mantra, we may say, has a corresponding deity called a presiding deity, and we can call these deities mantras. We ought to call them angels, we can call them a number of things that make our crooked paths straight when we make an effort to control them through speech, meaning concepts, and understanding of their meaning. And so, mantras are in fact intoned and uttered in the proper manner, according to letter and rhythm, is a speciality of Mimamsa as a philosophy. That is why they cease to be such when translated, for although the idea may be conveyed to the intellect, the power is not expressed. To make japa effective, two things are required. Trying to repeat the mantra in as authentic way as possible and meditating on its meaning, that requires input of feeling. If we don't have feeling in the repetition of the mantra called japa, it becomes a repetitive, meaningless, boring exercise that induces sleep. It's a good remedy for insomnia, but not much else. The idea of the repetition of a mantra in a systematic way called japa is to connect our attention in reality, in actuality, with what it symbolizes. And so when we do formal japa, sitting down, the first thing we should do is we should think of our guru, of our teacher, the teacher that gave us the mantra that is the most potent, because a mantra given by a teacher is the most potent. It contains all the energy of that guru's lineage and goes back ultimately to your chosen ideal. Thinking then, making salutation to your guru that gave you this mantra, you then see the chosen ideal that this mantra represents. And then you connect in a feeling way, not going on until you have felt the presence of this divine, and then lovingly repeating the name is the repetition of this mantra is recommended. Normally we do it 108 times. What's the significance of 108? Well, we have to make it effective, we should repeat it many, many times. And I should point out the difference between formal japa and informal. Formal japa is doing it as I'm prescribing it or describing it. Informal is continuously. You're probably aware, my teacher was asked, how many times should we repeat the mantra? And his reply was, 24 hours of the day. We should never stop. It should be an ongoing, unconscious repetition all the time. Sometimes we have to make friends with this mantra. I'll always remember a devotee who did the pilgrimage, the yatra around Mount Kailash. And before he went on this pilgrimage, he asked me, what should my spiritual practice be? And I said, japa. Always just repeat your mantra. Every step you repeat your mantra. Now, this wasn't good news for him because his mantra didn't have that much meaning for him. Because in the beginning, we have to try to make friends with our mantra and understand. But it's not a self-effort thing. It is just by considered, disciplined repetition, the mantra reveals itself. And so he did it. And his conclusion was, an amazing revelation. I now understand what my mantra means. Because most mantras can be found anywhere. Excuse me. Most mantras can be found anywhere. You can look them up on the internet even. But that's not the point. The selected mantra for you has a meaning that has to be revealed to you to make it meaningful. It was specifically chosen for you. And so he was delighted to understand that by habitual repetition, the mantra revealed itself. A wonderful, wonderful example of this happening. So this is the informal repetition. What about the formal repetition? I'll just recap. We start off by thinking of our specific competent teacher who gave us the mantra in this particular case. And then from there to see how this mantra is the audial embodiment of our chosen ideal. and then making that intimate connection and meditating then. So the repetition of mantra as japa is a form of meditation and leads us to a position of poise where in the dividedness that we are experiencing becomes oneness. That sense of oneness itself is really meditation. It's a wonderful tool that we have. We should use it. I was beginning to ask why 108 times in formal meditation is because we have to repeat it many, many times, let's say 100. Why should we round it off to 108? Because 108 is a multiple of 9, where every multiple of 9, its separate digits add up to 9. Why 9? Is because 3 and 3 and 3 represents the entire existence that we know of. How so? Well, the first 3 will represent the various manifested qualities, if you will, of a saguna Brahman, that is, the quality of creation, the quality of sustentation and dissolution. Secondly, the only thing that is there in the whole of this universe, wherever you look and however you think of it, is threefold. These are called the gunas that serve to bind us. And these are sattva, rajas, and tamas. There is nothing else. Psychologically, it will be a feeling of dullness and laziness and lack of enthusiasm. It's called tamas. Or intense enthusiastic effort, which is called rajas. Both of these are orientated in an egocentric way and cause us the binding part of this. These are guna. Then sattva, these are using positive thoughts, including mantras, which elevate the mind and serve to reform the habit level. This is called sattva. In terms of physics, we see that sattva represents the tendency of the universe to unite everything. We call this the principle of falling or gravity. This is called sattva. The propensity for things to fly off in an infinite way is called electrical energy. It's called rajas. And the propensity of nature for things not to move, as Newton describes, without being pushed. This is called inertia. And we call this tamas. Whichever way you look at it, these 3 are the dominant forces. Everything is a combination of these 3. And the third group of 3s will be this experience that we have in consciousness, which amounts to our waking consciousness, which amounts to our dream consciousness, and our dreamless sleep consciousness. The inference of the 4th is there, and the Mandukya Upanishad in its 12 verses will describe this completely, because this is how Om represents the entire range of our consciousness, including the silence afterwards, which is the 4th, the Turiya. So the Mandukya Upanishad will describe very comprehensively how this comprising Om represents these 3 states of consciousness. Repetition of this, therefore, gives us the whole range of divine expression, which we call our consciousness. Excuse me. Now, how to do japa? This is done according to the directions of a competent teacher. But japa, just to recall, means the repetition of a mantra that has to be done with devotion and faith. And after these preliminaries have been gone through that I described, these consist in cleaning the body, wearing clean clothes for the purpose of doing japa as we do for meditation, and forms a prerequisite for meditation. It sets up the tone and the atmosphere for a meditative practice. Sometimes people ask me, so my teacher said you should repeat this mantra 108 times. But then during the process, my mind gets distracted. Then what to do? Will I start again? And then I never get any further than this. And my recommendation is, no, once the japa has led the mind into a meditative state, the use of the japa then has fulfilled its purpose. 108 times, I don't have a time to do this very often. Well, all right. It is better to say your mantra a few times with deep faith and devotion, with a sense of sincerity and a sense of heartfelt feeling, than to do it 1,000 times. But bear in mind that this 1,000 times is our unconscious development. It is our meditative practice throughout our normal waking life, completely and all systematically doing it. Some people say, because I have a very busy life and I have to concentrate on many different activities, how is it possible to do this japa? Well, once you practice this japa continuously, this 24 hours of the day, then you'll find yourself unconsciously repeating it all the time. It is an unconscious movement. You see, supposing you form a relationship with somebody and you're thinking of them constantly. Is this not equivalent to repeating their name all the time? You don't have to concentrate on this. It itself produces concentration. But in formal japa, naturally, concentration is required. The difference between formal and informal japa is one does not require concentration, and the other one does. Because you see, when you call somebody's name, you don't have to think, now, what does this name mean? Who is this person? And so on. You will automatically know straight away. It doesn't require much attention. But when you do it with deep faith and devotion in a concentrated way through a systematic practice, then that's different. Both are required. And I hope I've explained to some extent the significance of japa and why great saints like Swami Brahmananda and others emphasize this practice of japa above everything else. Holy Mother herself will emphasize it tremendously. Japa and prayer. When you sit down for your so-called meditation, it is actually a threefold practice of prayer, japa, and meditation. I hope this clarifies this. And so we leave it off for today, unless there are any quick questions related to the topic. To facilitate that, I will mute my microphone.
Swamiji, I would like to ask your opinion about Japa Mala. Is it better to use the Japa Mala, or it is better to forget the Japa Mala and just concentrate? Because if you are using the Japa Mala, your body is not completely quiet. You move your hands. And when you finish, seems you are starting from this point because you say quite completely without movement. So it is better to use it or not?
Well, it's different for different people. What does your guru say? Don't answer.
I'm asking to my guru.
Yes. Well, when your guru gave you an instruction, your guru would have covered that, all right? So it might be, if you've forgotten the instruction, that's different. All right. But generally, I'll make a comment. For counting purposes, no doubt, a mala is useful for some people. And so if your guru has instructed you to use a mala, then it would be for several reasons. Firstly, when you occupy the fingers, it gives you awareness of the body. And this awareness of body is a significant if you are revaluing this body as a God's divine instrument. And it connects you, therefore, with the physical. And the physical connection connects you with the divine. On the other hand, if you are a kind of counting person and the counting itself distracts you, then many teachers will instruct you, don't use a mala, don't use anything, and there is no prescribed number of times to repeat it. Now, the instruction is sometimes like Microsoft, it requires an upgrade from time to time. So it's important to connect with the guru and make the update a little bit. Because spiritual practice is not static, it's a development, and intensification should be from day to day. That's how we register the effectiveness of spiritual practice, that the intensity increases on a daily basis. Then there's another method, and that is if you, particularly for if you have a male Ishtadevata, and that is use of the fingers, in which case you will be repeating your mantra with the awareness of the tanmatras themselves that I've just described. Because the repetition of a mantra with the use of your hands is a combination of the repetition of the mantra, the japa, with mudra. And so that has a significance. Whatever is most useful to align our attention to the glory of the divine. And this will vary from person to person. So we have to review it with our teacher and find out what is at this particular time, what is this best method for you.
Thank you.
Very, very, very often for many people who are hooked up on the legalistic point of view, it's probably not good to do a counting thing. Classically 108, but it's whatever is most useful for you. It's much better, in my personal opinion, to repeat a mantra, let us say 9 times with a great depth of meaning, with a great intensity, which has a mobilizing effect on the heart, so to speak, is better than in a meaningless way counting 108 or multiples of 108, where maybe sleep sets in because of dullness and boredom. You see, if you repeat any word without the feeling, it will induce a state of dullness. Supposing you decide that you'll concentrate on an elephant, mantra has 2 aspects to it. Every thought has 2 aspects to it. There is the nama rupa. The rupa is the actual form. So I have seen an elephant, that's the form, that's the rupa side of it. But then when I recall it, this is nama side of it, where a word and a concept are associated, have to be associated, there's no other way. So if I say elephant, elephant appears in the mind, a picture of it. Now if I repeat elephant, elephant, without thinking of the elephant's strength, the elephant's size, the beauty of an elephant's eyes, its eyelids, and so on, and all the qualities I want to imbibe from the elephant. If I simply are repeating the word elephant, 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 then ultimately the meaning of it goes away, and this torpidity comes in, and there's absolutely no use for it. And so there's the same thing with mantra. I start off by visualizing what this means, and in this visualization, I'm now repeating the mantra with a great deal of feeling and meaning. And that is where it becomes effective. Well, I hope that clarifies a few things.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Have a beautiful day and enjoy the rest of your weekend. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. Thanks.
Thank you, Swamiji. That was really good.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Om